Hi, and welcome to episode 79 of the Breaking Bio podcast. I'm Morgan Jackson, a PhD student at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada.
I'm Tawny, and I'm a researcher based at the University of Cambridge in England.
And this week, we're back, finally. It's been a little while, but we're back with new episodes, and hopefully they'll be continuing for a while longer. And this week, we're joined by Dr. Alex Wild, who is the new curator of entomology at the University of Texas at Austin. Alex, thanks for joining us, and do you want to tell everybody at home a little bit more about what you do?
Hey, well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate getting to participate this time in Breaking Bio. I'm very, very happy for the opportunity. Most people who know me as a photographer. I very recently started kind of a new track. I am, since January, I have been the curator of entomology at the University of Texas at Austin in a smallish insect collection. It's about 1 million specimens, which is small for an insect collection. And it's located actually at the famous Brackenridge Field Laboratory in Austin, Texas, which I know as an ant guy is a place of a lot of really important fire ant research studies. Anyway, I'm sitting here in an insect collection, which is fantastic.
So my first very basic question is, what's the day-to-day life of an entomology curator?
Well, I'll tell you that after I settle in for a little bit longer. This collection was actually closed for a little while, so my day-to-day life has been doing things like getting the custodial service restarted and just figuring out what keys open what doors and that sort of thing. There is a kind of a balance of the administrative aspects of running a collection, and that means meeting with various people in various departments on campus to coordinate our activities. There is sort of a supervisory aspect to it. We have people who come in and use our collections for research. There is the sending in and out of loans to researchers in various institutions. And we're doing a little bit of outreach and fundraising and that sort of thing, too.
Cool. So I guess everyone who knows you as a photographer probably knows that your main interest is in ants. So can you tell us a bit more about the ant collection that you have going on and your research with that?
So I've inherited with this collection here a small but historically important ant collection. My personal collection that I'm bringing here and integrating into the University of Texas collection is actually quite a lot larger than the collection I found here. But the collection at the University of Texas is interesting partly because of our association with Brackenridge Field Labs. Now, this is an area that was extensively surveyed for ants in the 1970s, before the fire ant, the famous fire ant invasion happened in the United States. And so we have these historically important collections from before the fire ant invasion. We have a lot of voucher specimens from fire ant studies that were done here as the invasion swept through. And we also have a lot of collections from the fire ant's native range, because researchers at Brackenridge, mostly with Larry Gilbert's lab, have gone down to Argentina in search of natural enemies and doing various questions on the native ecology of the fire ants. We have some of the Argentinian material as well. And I was particularly excited about that. I spent a lot of time in subtropical South America, usually in Paraguay, but also Brazil and Argentina. And this is an area that I know fairly well, and I was very excited to see when I got here they have quite an extensive collection from that region that is in need of a little bit of curation.
Well, so today happens to be Taxonomy Day or Taxonomist Appreciation Day, and I see there's flowers on your bookshelf behind your head there, so I assume that those are in recognition of all your hard work already. Obviously, ants are one of these mega diverse families, and you yourself have done a lot of taxonomic work on ants, and as well as on other Hymenoptera groups, and I think some other stuff as well. But And you mentioned that the UT Austin collection was closed down, I assume because of a lack of a curator for a certain period of time. Do you see, where do you see taxonomy going in the coming future, and what role do you think collections are obviously going to play in that?
Well, we're certainly seeing, it's always been an interesting time for taxonomy. And you can't not have taxonomy just because we have to be able to communicate about things. The question is, where will support for taxonomy come? Because all of this, all the infrastructure, all the expertise requires a certain amount of input. I mean, taxonomists produce a very valuable public good, and we have, to the present, been able to enjoy some level of public support in terms of taxpayer support and institutional support. So, of course, the question I think going forward is how can we maintain that? I got a little bit of a soapbox to stand on here, and there's a lot of talk about how taxonomy is in danger and how we're losing taxonomists and how there's no support for taxonomy, and that's true and not true at the same time. And it depends on what you mean by how we measure the activity of taxonomy. What's certainly true is that a much, much smaller percentage of biologists, of working biologists, and a much smaller percentage of research funding for biology now goes to taxonomy than before, in spite of taxonomy being really important. I mean, if you were to walk into a biology department 50 years ago, half the people there at least would have been taxonomists. Now you walk in, and if you can find a taxonomist at all, you're kind of lucky. But the other thing that's been going on, though, is this massive explosion of science and biology of all kinds, so that biology as a whole is doing really well, and there are actually more publishing and working taxonomists now than there have ever been. It's just that our growth has not kept pace with the growth of everybody else, and so the question is, taxonomists are not an endangered species, but the question becomes, when there's such a small percentage of biologists who are actually taxonomists, how easy will it be going forward to continue to maintain support for what we do? That's kind of a long answer.
No, it's good. I mean, it goes back to classic ecology of can you find viable propagation of your field if people actually making recruiting students is the allegorist case, but yeah.
I kind of want to be annoying and just go back to the fire ants briefly. So you were saying that you've got collections that come from historical collections from before and after the fire ant invasion. So are you looking at what's happening to these populations as the fire ants sweep through, or are there people looking at this, or do you have enough specimens for that?
Well, personally, I'm not doing anything with it other than safeguarding it right now. These were studies that were done by Don Feener, Sanford Porter, Lloyd Morrison, Larry Gilbert, a bunch of ant people who've worked at Brackenridge. I think the most interesting finding of that whole series is that when the fire ants swept through central Texas in the 1980s, it was just a kind of a scorched earth invasion. I mean, the fire ants really came through in massive numbers. A lot of things disappeared, and that was documented here. But then, when about 15 years later, around in the late 90s, early 2000s, Lloyd Morrison and others resurveyed the same areas that had shown such devastation, and discovered that a lot of, not everything, but a lot of the native species were actually back in some number. And even though the fire ants are still easily the most abundant ants around here, it's looking like that original invasion wave was sort of a temporary thing, and now things have stabilized a bit more, or the natives are able to come back. I would like to, at some point in the next few years, since these things seem to have been done around 15-year intervals, and now we're 15 years on, is to go do it again and see what the story has been. Again, all I've done is sort of walk around in the trails and go, haha, look, ants. So this will require a little bit more, planning and sampling and all that.
Yeah, but it's one of those really cool things that you don't really, the people often don't think about when it comes to curating museum collections, is you often don't know what these things are going to be useful for in the future. So it's really important to have them, and it's very cool.
Well, one thing we're all, I shouldn't say looking forward to, but we have a brand new ant invader in Texas. They're calling it the Tawny crazy ant, or Nylandaria fulva. And this thing sweeps through in numbers that make fire ants blush. And in areas where they take over, they just build up to tremendous numbers. The crazy ants don't sting, but they do have a habit of getting indoors, which fire ants don't typically do, and running all over everything, which is very disconcerting. So I'm hoping that we won't get to serve, we won't get to serve as yet another study for how an invasive ant sweeps through, but we might want to do some surveying and then resurveying as the ants come through. Again, we have a guy at Brackenridge, Ed LeBrun, who's done a lot of really great work on how the fire ants and crazy ants are interacting in other parts of Texas. So we're kind of bracing for when they sweep through here, if they sweep through here.
Well, keeping itself relevant is always a good thing, and making sure that you've always got something to do. So if new ants suddenly show up,
things to do.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's at a loss for work to do, I'm sure. So perhaps the other thing people are at home are, well aware of with you and your online persona at least, is your crusade for copyright, especially for artists as well as for academics. You're a big proponent for keeping out the parasites of the internet, essentially, from leeching off of the hard work of scientists and artists, whether it's photographers and whatnot, and properly attributing stuff. Can you give us a little background on perhaps how you got so involved in the copyright wars and where you see that going?
I don't think anyone sets out wanting to get involved in copyright. It's sort of like, what I really want to do is get involved in benefits law. These guys, there's just some things. I say that because my dad's a benefits lawyer, and that always struck me as being incredibly dry. And I'm like, what is really interesting is intellectual property law and copyright. But like a lot of people, I stumbled into it because I didn't really have much of a choice. It was kind of impacting my livelihood in a way that was a bit disturbing and unanticipated. I guess I just never. I started out with photography like a lot of people do because I just really liked the subject that I was photographing. I mean, it really kind of started nerding out about ants. And it doesn't matter what you photograph. You could be nerding out about jet skis or birds or roller derby or something. But you take photos of what you love and you post them online because you want to share. And for those of us who were making a living at photography, that is, for a number of years, I paid basically my mortgage, and I had a kid. I did all sorts of things that photography was supporting. You sort of depend on a particular model of you depend on a business model to keep working. And the frustrating thing about being a commercial photographer in the age of the internet is that it turns out that so few people are aware of copyright and how it works that a lot of people are just kind of assuming everything online is free to use, and you end up in these situations where over 90% of the commercial uses of the photos that I was making were done without any permission or agreement or anything, and it becomes difficult to justify how you charge businesses to market themselves with your photograph or to use them in books and that sort of thing when their competitors are doing just fine taking them. it kind of starts to, you start seeing fewer and fewer people willing to pay for the things that you've spent time and money making. So I ended up trying to grapple with this issue of how do I keep doing photography when no one's paying for it but everyone's using it? At the same time, it's a frustrating issue because my business never even would have existed without the internet, because that's where most of my clients come from. I'd put photos on the internet, and they'd find me through Google, and so it's this kind of love-hate relationship because of the easy access the internet affords. People can find my work, but then they can also profit from it in a way where they really should be paying something back, but aren't. Where is it going? No one knows. Actually, the last couple of years, the situation with copyright has shown there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that it's looking like Congress is starting to take the issue seriously in ways that are good for both image users and image creators. People like to think of me as I know people think of me as a very strong pro-copyright crusader or something. Like, I actually have a very moderate view of copyright in the grand spectrum of things. I'm just really vocal about kind of a moderate opinion. I think that fair use laws should be expanded. I think copyright terms are just insanely long. I think rights holders should be required to register everything instead of just automatically having things copyrighted. These are all very kind of more moderate views on copyright. But at the same time, if we want nice things to exist, the people who make those nice things need to be able to eat. So it's kind of balancing these things. Anyway, I could go on and on about copyright, but Congress is starting to consider some proposals that would shift the horrible enforcement problem. Basically, right now, it's very difficult to really enforce copyright at all, and when you do, you have to go through this system that was designed for much larger cases. So basically, infringement happens most of the time, and 99.9% of the time, nothing ever happens. A lot of that's fine. But when a case does go to court, it ends up costing literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you get into these obscene amounts of money changing hands, and that's just because it's the way the system is built. And so Congress is considering this newer tribunal system that takes the lawyers, and there's where the money goes, takes the lawyers out of the equation and allows things to be settled much more in a small claims or a much simpler way. I don't think biologists pay much attention to these intellectual property issues, but I think things are going to get a little easier on that front. Yeah. Anyway, those are Alex's half-baked views on copyright.
Copyright Alex Wild.
Yeah. Don't spread this without permission. Yeah.
So this leads us quite nicely into your new crowdfunding campaign. So maybe you can just give us an overview of what you're trying to achieve and how it's going so far.
Yeah, so we've got a project called Insects Unlocked, which is essentially the imaging system here at the University of Texas. It's kind of a standard insect photography rig that a lot of photographers are using these days. And the University of Texas is a big public institution, and we would like to make some public images that anyone can use. Unfortunately, this is the standard problem of all museums, is our funding is limited, and our operating budget basically covers the bare bones minimum of us just keeping the lights on and getting loans in and out and cabinets and all that. In order to get people who can actually sit at an imaging system and produce something that requires money. And so I thought, considering how many people would benefit from having freely available public domain images, I thought, well, why don't we just put out a call for funding to see if the entomological community would be willing to throw us some change, and we can pull it together and get a functioning image production system. That way our people are supported and everybody gets free images they can use for anything.
So what kind of insects, and are you taking collected ones or live ones? Are you going for behavior or general
This
shots?
is a combination of things. Our camera is mostly tethered to a system that does best with preserved specimens, but you can unhook it and carry it out into the field. I mean, our collection is embedded in Brackenridge Field Lab, which is an 80-acre forest reserve, so we'll be able to take it out and do some live photography. I have some students signed up for this program already, but we're trying to enlist some more. And I'm leaving the subject matter in the hands of the students, so it will kind of take the direction that they're interested in. Like, for instance, we have a young arachnologist on board, and so she's going to be doing spiders. I'm going to be using the system when I have time, so that, of course, means more ant bits and maybe ant nests and that kind of thing. There is one perk that we've put in into our fundraising program, that if you give a particular amount, you'll be able to we'll take whatever images you'd like, assuming we have access to the subject matter. So you can use our system to commission images of particular things. Like if you really, really want a photograph of the elytra of a particular jeweled beetle, we'll do that for you. But again, it has a cost. To drag our arachnologist away from her spiders, you might need to donate a little more. But then, anyway, yeah. So it's going to be a mix of things that I think are interesting, that the donors would like to see done, and what the students on the project would like to image themselves. And video. I should note that our cameras are capable of video, and while I personally am terrible at doing video, I'd be happy to have the students give their hand at it.
So for your current students and any that might be tempted to try and get in touch to take part, then what kind of background do they need, and what kind of training are they going to get in this?
Most of them will already have an entomological background of some kind, and so the training is going to be more on the lines of just how you use an SLR camera. That part's relatively easy. The harder part is, how do you think about using your camera in a way that produces something that's aesthetically pleasing, that's a bit more to the art side of it. And there'll be some training on using the software. I'm going to hopefully get one or two students who are really into outreach, who are going to be doing a lot more of our blogging and uploading and more of the public interface of things. And there'll be others who might be happier to do just the imaging. We're really seeing who else we can bring in, and we'll see how it develops. But yeah, it's kind of like a learn how to do science photography and bugs.
Well, I think it's a really neat idea, and a neat that word that I was going to say that just totally flew out of my head and not through my mouth. Initiative. That's the one. The initiative. That's the important word that I was going with. Anyways, I think it's neat. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody before. Are you aware of any other than government agencies that put this stuff out there automatically? Are you aware of any other photographers or projects like this that are making images, prepaying for images and then just throwing them out there?
So there are a couple private photographers who are doing things like making public domain image sites and then serving ads over them. Those tend not to be specialized. They're like, here's a photo of a tree in my yard and some dogs and what have you, and then there's ads for whatever running in the sidebar. There's obviously a demand for images that have no strings attached. People I've noticed are willing to. Here's the odd thing: they won't use a commercial photographer's image, even if it's inexpensive, but they will pay for public domain images because they know that they are free and clear. There's a site called Teachers Pay Teachers, and it's just teachers uploading their PowerPoints and some of them uploading public domain, like they've spent time combing the web and Wikimedia for known public domain media, bundling them together, and people are paying them for it because something, with no strings attached is worth money. And so there is actually a lot of this. Sort of surprised me. I was like, is it ethical to sell public domain stuff? But yeah, what you're selling is the time. And so I thought, well, there really is a demand for media that's just unencumbered. Problem, of course, is the people who make it, unless they're independently wealthy, have to be supported somehow, or the media just they're just not going to be made. So crowdfunding is one way to do it. While I set the goal for our project at $8,000, which, if you look at the actual cost of producing images, that's actually not a whole lot of money. Like if you look at the median photographer income in the United States is about $30,000 a year. If you really want someone producing full-time images of thousands of dollars, you're actually looking at something of a minimum of about that much when you basically have to support their full salary and health care, and $30,000 is, photographers make less than high school teachers on average. It's not a whole lot. However, when we're at a public institution, the state of Texas is paying a lot of our hidden costs. I mean, they're covering the building, the bones of the imaging system was supported by the university, and so this campaign is actually more of a funding match than anything else. I haven't explicitly said that, but with the university providing the roof over our heads and they cover part of the salary of work-study students. Even though we're really pushing to try to get this crowdfunding money, if you were to fully support public domain images on this model, it's actually fairly expensive. So we're trying to ease into it with a little sort of funding matched by the public institution kind of way.
Yeah. So where do you see it going? So you said you've got an $8,000 target, and assumably that'll help pay for some of these costs that you said. But how many images are you hoping to get out of this, and what sort of taxonomic diversity may they put there? And then, of course, do you see this solving some issues that maybe we've seen this week with images that are correctly identified and used online?
Yeah, we're not going to solve the problem of images, incorrectly identified images online. Even when you put a lot of time into correctly identifying images, the amount of copying that goes on the internet is also accompanied by an awful lot of creative caption writing that goes on the internet. I've had all sorts of images of mine that just sort of spread around, and somewhere along the line they acquire an incorrect caption of the incorrect species, and then it takes off from there. You can almost draw a phylogeny of how my images have been copied on the internet based on the errors that are introduced. Like, for instance, Argentine ants. That's a species of pest ant I did my PhD dissertation on. They are small, shrivelly, featureless brown ants. I have a lovely photograph on my website of a Formica aureus, which is a fairly rare Sierra Nevada thatch mound ant that's beautiful, red and black, very striking ant. Someone mislabeled that photo as an Argentine ant about 10 years ago, and now that photo pops up on all sorts of pest control websites and anything because it's much more attractive than an actual Argentine ant. So people see it in a Google search and are like, we'll use that one. It's prettier. I'm completely going off topic from your question.
That's totally fine. That's totally fine.
Which was
taxonomy by committee is just fine as well. So
yeah. So here's me just wishful thinking about this. What I would really like long term for this kind of project is enough donors and enough public interest to come together where we could actually endow a proper image specialist position here. This is going to require way more than a little crowdfunding platform, but if we have an endowed image position, then we have someone full-time who's highly trained, who would be able to have a very regular, solid output and help train students as they come up through the system to make public domain images. granted, that's a ways off. I mean, the other way we could do it is try to go through the state and say, hey, this is a really valuable resource. We're producing a public good. Maybe it would be great if the state could create a publicly funded position, sort of like extension, to do this. So I would really like to have a permanent imaging staff to do this rather than me on weekends and a ragtag band of happy students who are learning how to use the gear, which we are now, but we'd like it to grow into something that's more established as a public resource.
It sounds like a pretty good reality TV show if that fails, though.
Yeah. Next week on Insects Unlocked.
Yeah.
Let's try to figure out who used the specimen glue to glue the drawers together. I don't know.
Who changed the white balance?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're almost out of time here. So where can people learn more about Insects Unlocked, as well as everything else that you have got going on now or in the near future down at UT Austin?
Well, it's a really long URL.
Which we will put on top of, we put on the Breaking Bio podcast website as well, breakingbio.com.
Insects Unlocked, our funding is done, we're not using a private company like Kickstarter, we're using University of Texas's own system called Hornraiser. And I'm actually really enjoying it. We've gotten the full support of the University of Texas. I was taken aback by how quickly they jumped to help us, and they're actually handling all the back end. They're handling donors to our project as if they were proper donors to the University of Texas, so they're getting all the tax receipts and thank yous and all that. It's really been wonderful. But if you go to hornraiser.utexas.edu, there is our project and a number of other projects. Actually, there are a couple other science projects. There's another entomological one about using oil rigs in the Gulf to monitor migratory monarch populations. It looks really cool. As soon as I heard about it, I was like, oh, I'm giving you money. That's a great project. But yeah, so Hornraiser is where you go to learn more about our project. This collection here is part of the biodiversity collections at the University of Texas. So if you go to biodiversity collections, University of Texas, you'll see our department, entomology. We have a cave section. We actually have one of the world's largest collection of cave invertebrates, which is really cool. A lot of little eyeless beetles and spiders and things. There's a very large and important fish collection and herpetology collection here as well. And anyway, that's the biodiversity collections at the University of Texas.
Sweet. We'll have links to those, like I said, on breakingbio.com, so everybody can find it easily. And then might as well take a little second to pitch yourself, Alex, because obviously you're around the internet all over the place, and if people are interested in photography, I hear there's some places they can come and learn directly from you.
Well, so I teach a series of workshops together with some other folks like Peter Nazcrecki and John Abbott and Thomas Shahan called Bugshot. We have one coming up in California that unfortunately is sold out, so I don't know if people could get into that anymore. But we have one we still have about half the spaces left in Belize in August. So at least once or twice a year we have a workshop which is a bunch of nature nerds and camera gear in a really beautiful location. It's really one of the highlights of my year. If you go to Bugshot is the name of the workshop, look it up and come join us. It's a really spectacular experience. And I know, Morgan, you're actually an alumnus of our program.
I am, and I hardly recommend it for anybody thinking about it if you like cameras and especially hanging out with cool nature nerds that have shared interest. It was an extremely fun week when I went in Central Florida.
Yeah, whereas I just keep looking at the webpage for the Belize one and getting a bit sad that I can't afford the the flights over there from the UK. One day, maybe.
Yeah.
If you're still running them in 15 years' time, then I'll be there.
Well, pretty soon, we taxonomists are just going to be so important and wealthy that we'll all be able to fly our private helicopters down to these workshops and places. That's where we're headed. Once the government realizes how much we're actually worth.
Sounds good. I'm all for that day, and hopefully it can't come soon enough. Well, anyways, thank you very much, Alex, for joining us. Everybody listening at home, you can find Alex online. We'll put all the links that we talked about, as well as some of Alex's open source photos and open domain photos that he's already taken on the Breaking Bio podcast website, breakingbio.com.
Yeah, you don't even have to ask permission to put them up.
I'm not. I'm just going to take them. I'm going to take them and put them everywhere.
You can put them on T-shirts. You can put them on a coffee mug. You can anything. Make a poster. Yeah.
That stuff's getting plastered to the forehead. We're gonna have tattoos. Who's got the first open source, public domain image tattooed on their forehead? And then, so we'll put all those links and fun stuff up on our website, which is at breakingbio.com, like I said. You can also find us online in various places. Listen to the podcast on iTunes or now on Stitcher, if that's where you like to get your audio content. You can find us on Twitter at Breaking Bio and on Facebook by searching for the Breaking Bio podcast. That's it for this week. We'll be back next week with another new guest. And we need to thank the European Society for Evolutionary Biology for helping us keep our lights on at all times. So, anyways, thank you very much, Alex.
Yeah, thanks so much, Morgan and Tom. Appreciate it.